me double check. Come on. Come on, YouTube. Restream says we're live, but my YouTube page is not streaming yet. There it is. Okay. Cool. I have confirmation.
Hello, world.
Hello, world, indeed.
Happy Monday.
Happy November.
And happy Dia de los Muertos.
Happy Halloween hangover.
I've had very little candy.
Oh, look who's here on the bell.
Sneaking in.
It's John.
Hello.
Oh, hey, I guess, Tigger. All right, are you guys getting any clicky from me from my microphone?
Nope. So far, so good.
All right. You know what's weird? We didn't get any clicky at all from my microphone when we were restreaming for 24 hours. And go to webinar, like 2 hours in, starts clicking. So it's kind of frustrating. So have we started already?
I just hit the go live button and then you walked into the room. So you came in just in time.
Hey, Piranha Mama, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Just hit the go live button and then you... Oh, there's me coming back through the microphone.
Yeah. The loop, circular thing, if you will. Just had a couple of stories. Like I said, I just came off of teaching. So that'll be fun. But
our favorite is the stolen house one.
Well, did you guys see the ones about China and their hacking competition?
Hacking competition? I didn't see that one.
No.
Yeah. Let's see if we can find that one.
Or is that a Squid Game one? No, that's not it.
That's like their version of pwn to own, right? Essentially.
Yeah, it's like their version of pwn to own, and they pwned a lot. Crap. I'll have to hunt for it. But yeah, they But they hacked like Windows 10, they got Chrome. VMware. Here we go. Got it. Here, I'm going to put it in.
Cool.
Put it into the chat, and then I'm ready to go. Private chat. I'll be your private chat. All right. Who wants to drive today? Because I don't even know what the stories are. I'll drive. Go ahead. Let's kick it off. I'll do the intro.
Well, I'm going to add the your link here to the notes.
I see you in there.
And then we'll hit the video. Let's get started. Okay.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security, talking about news. Today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about ransomware, which sucks. but we are going to be talking about some of our friends getting paid with Dragos, $200 million in the next round of funding, which I usually don't like to talk about funding rounds because that's the whole side of security that I think is creepy and I'm going to need to shower afterwards. But I love Rob M. Lee and I love what Dragos is doing, so we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about a number of different attacks. A guy lost his home, which is interesting. Government organizations said that Russia has hacked at least 14 IT service providers, which I just think it's more than one, but less than a million. They've gotten a lot more than that. And we're going to be talking about how China is doing a mad, crazy flex by absolutely terrifying the hell out of me personally, because I think that we're screwed. I am joined by an illustrious crew. If we could put up the crew. We have Tim is on. We have Ben is back again, and we've got Prana Mama. I wish I could say as always, but she's busy. She's got a life. She's got things that she's got to do. She just doesn't hang out in her basement and do webcasts and training all day. Because who the hell would do that? Well, Ryan, should we go through the ransomware hit list first? Should we start with the ransomware, get that out of the way?
Sure.
Let's
see, there's a big list somewhere.
Yeah, we've got 3 main ones. Ransomware has infected 30 companies this quarter, whatever. Let's talk about how they hacked the NRA. This is going to be political, which means it's going to be fun. But the whole story, and it has an autoplay video, which sucks unless you have autoplay disabled in your browser, which you totally should. We're seeing, ransomware going after political organizations, political action communities, political parties. And I'm kind of trying to figure out, do you think that this is the standard Russian cyber criminal groups? Or do you think that it's other groups trying to look like Russian cyber criminal groups? I wanted to get everyone's opinion on this, because it's funny, because if there's any ransomware that happens now, everyone's like, Russians! Sure. It's the Russians. It's like it was if you go back about 10 years ago, whenever Rob T. Lee coined the term APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, which is his way of saying the Chinese. Every hack was the Chinese from that point on. It was like, clearly this was the A's, the P's, and the T's. And I'm wondering right now, are Russians pretty much the boogeyman for everything? Or do you think the Russians are really behind this one?
I mean, it's hard to tell. The motivations feel weird and fishy, and I don't completely understand those from a geopolitical aspect. But if you think about the idea of attribution, is it someone officially sanctioned by the Russian party or the Russian government, or is it someone operating within Russia who just has the to go ahead and okay as long as they're not targeting Russian assets? I feel like there's a lot more granularity that could exist in there aside from.
Well, and Ben, there's also the whole question of, should it even matter, or does it matter? Because I think it does, right? At some level, whenever the APT craze was going on, it was like America was waking up to, holy crap, the Chinese are hacking like mad. And that was somewhat important, but how does this actually change your day-to-day lifestyle? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think it's good to know, from a threat feed perspective, where some of that stuff comes from. But you're right. I think the end result is pretty much the same.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't know how much it actually matters. So that was, we've got more ransomware. It's in the show notes if you guys want to read them. The one that I would like to talk about next is the hacking competition in I think it's in Guangzhou, but Chenzhou, China. So am I the only one that's read this article, or because I can kind of surmise it? If you want me to, I can talk about what this means. But it basically boils down to, we're screwed.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah. And let me explain what I mean by exactly we're screwed, and how that actually ties into some real things that are tangible. All right. So you have the Chanfu Cup, and I know I'm mispronouncing it. Ni hao ma, our Chinese listeners. But the reason why this concerns me is a whole bunch of Chinese organizations have been basically, pause on that right there, I think that's important, have been basically kicked out of various pwn-to-own competitions. And setting up a little background and history, the DEF CON Capture the Flag competitions, they used to be ran by groups like Ken Shoto and all these things. And you had a very diverse group of teams that would show up to actually do these Capture the Flag competitions. And it just got to the point where you had groups like Sexy Pandas show up from China and just decimate the competition. They were really, really, really good. In parallel, you have cyber coding competitions, like collegiate cyber coding competitions. And I remember one of our employees was in college at the time. This was maybe a decade ago. His team got 4th, and it was huge news because a U.S. team actually got 4th in this. Then you move forward again, and you get into the pwn-to-own competitions out of Austin, and they move around, right? You have these pwn-to-own competitions where they put up operating systems and applications, and they put up bounties around these different operating systems and around these different applications. And then as the teams basically prove that they can hack that, then they win those bounties. And we have our own here in the United States that used to bring in all kinds of people from around the world. In China, I believe some of the Chinese teams were actually banned from joining the Pwn to Own competitions. And it's not like you sit down that day and you start hacking Chrome. That's not how Pwn to Own works. A lot of the people that compete in Pwn to Own, they'll work for an entire year to try to get a series of these exploits in place and ready to go. So what happened is they have, what is it, Tingfu Cup. And once again, I know I'm mispronouncing it. I'm sorry for people that are fluent in Chinese, but seriously, Chinese is way hard for me. I tried to learn it a couple of times and I suck at it. Whenever you have the phrase ma, 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 and they can mean like anything from a dog to a goat to a mother, just on how you do it, it's tough for me to get that language. So I apologize profusely. But like I said, I for one apologize to our new Chinese overlords. So what happened is China created their own Pwn to Own competition. And can you put up the operating systems and the vulnerabilities that were discovered? So Windows 10 was compromised 5 times, PDF 4 times, Ubuntu 4 times, Parallels 3 times, iOS 15 3 times, including a remote code execution and a jailbreak. Apple Safari, Google Chrome 2 times, Asus router 2 times, Docker 1 time, VMware 1 time, Workstation 1 time, QEMU 1 time, Exchange. I thought it went up from 1. I thought that they now had it to like 3. And this is like absolutely insane. And honestly, because this is completely ran by the Chinese and it's just, I think it's almost all Chinese companies, organizations, this is a flex by the Chinese government. Where you have North Korea loves to march down the middle of a boulevard with great big, huge nuclear missiles and setting up all that stuff. This is the equivalent of China basically being very, very, very clear that they have mad cyber offensive skill sets. And this is what they were willing to share publicly. So
that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, that's the part I think that should scare literally everybody, is this is China flexing. This is China sharing what they did. And you can see the bounty prizes right there. No one cares about those bounty prizes. The Chinese government had these vulnerabilities. We're using these vulnerabilities. And I can guarantee you the Chinese government has better vulnerabilities in their bag of tricks. So I set that up, hopefully enough for a lot of you to read it, because I dance for time every once in a while. Am I off base on this? Or am I reading this in a totally paranoid sort of way?
Well, I think you are.
Back to what you were saying, like with the first question, right, about the Russians, right? So kind of new-ish in cybersecurity, like it's either the Russians or the Chinese, right? And so here we are again. And this is really scary because the Chinese are so confident of what they have in their back pocket that they can show this to you. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah,
and I keep on, and this is going to tie into Dragos here a little bit later, but one of the things I keep talking about is, as we get more and more into pen testing, breaking into organizations, doing things like that, after a while, if you're offensive, you start to get a little bit paranoid, and I'm well beyond paranoid right now. I'm well beyond paranoid, and I talk to my friends and family, and seriously, if I were a nation state and I wanted to screw with the United States, you'd wait for a very large snowstorm, very cold temperatures, and then you would hit SCADA ICS OT technology, and you would bring down the power grid in large sections of the United States. And I think what this actually shows is that China absolutely has the freaking capability to do that. Because if you put that list up, if you look at what they have, once again, whenever they're listing out Windows, they're listing out Exchange, they're listing out Docker, they're listing out, what are the other ones? They had Docker and VMware, ESX.
Most of your virtualization.
That's basically like, you're not safe anywhere, boys and girls.
We've been talking a lot about NSO too, and one of the exploits that came up in this Chinese competition was like a zero interaction, no click iOS exploit. If you're just casually tossing out like no click iPhone owning exploits just to show that you have them, like I think it's like Pranamama said, there's got to be worse in the back pocket.
Yeah. James Driscoll said this all fits into the long-term goal of world domination. There's a book out there called The 100-Year Marathon that talks about Chinese goal to be the most powerful country on earth. Now, people say that, and like honestly, any country that's competing at that level is always trying to increase their sphere of influence, right? The United States did it. The UK did it. If you go all the way back to Florence and Genoa and all these places, they did it. You go to Amsterdam for a while, that was the center of commerce. So that is a scary book. I've read it. But if you really want to read something terrifying, read Maldelsky's Long Cycles in World Economics. That's fun. Because what it talks about is where the transition lies between rising and falling superpowers. It's never nice, ever. So I worry about this stuff, right? And I'm not trying to paint the Chinese as inherently evil, right? Because it's a very large, complex country. It's very, very difficult to paint with a wide paintbrush. But one of the concerns that I have is I fundamentally believe United States government, I firmly believe that most executives of companies that are critical infrastructure of the United States aren't taking this shit seriously. And we desperately need to start taking this seriously. I was just teaching a class today, and I'm like, payment card industry still says 7 characters is a good enough minimum password length. We're hosed. We're in deep, deep, deep trouble as well.
Well, and I was just reading recently too that you can't have a password like over 16 characters in some of the Windows environments. So, like even if you could get people on the right side of using a passphrase that's, a sentence, then the infrastructure can't support it either.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and and you see that all the time. I mean, there's some banks out there that still won't allow you to do passwords greater than 12 characters. And a lot of that has to do with legacy infrastructure on the ass end that just won't support it. And anytime you sit down and talk to executives of these companies, you're like, look, you're running 9 characters, and Ben knows, Tim would too. You sit down and you have conversations with these executives, and they're like, well, it would cost us literally millions of dollars to update the system to be something newer that can accept a longer password. You always want to ask the question, when? If we're not going to do that now, if we're not going to rip and replace the AS400, if we're not going to replace the Solaris 9 box that's at the heart of a DoD system, the next question is, when are you going to? And many times, AS400, Isaac, yes. Like a lot of financial institutions are still running AS400s as some of the hearts of their most critical processing.
That mainframe.
So, welcome. Oh. Should we go to something a little bit less fun, or did anybody else have anything to add on this one?
Well, a couple of people in chat mentioned it. And one of my first concerns with seeing this is at least with Pwn to Own, there tends to be a fairly good disclosure process with that. Like, maybe this is my skepticism here showing, like, I don't think any of these vendors on this list are going to get a heads up. Hey, here's what's actually was accomplished at this competition. Like, there's like, yeah, we did this, we can prove it, but
now
we have no obligation to actually.
I thought they were going to disclose from this competition.
Okay, I didn't see if they did.
I thought that's part of it. There's a disclosure period. Somebody can double check on that. I thought I read somewhere that they will disclose and coordinate with the vendors on that as well.
Okay, that makes me feel 0.1% better.
But seriously, if they're like, well, here you go, here's the source code for this exploit. Once again, you're like, what the hell are they keeping?
No.
Yeah.
And how long have they been sitting on this?
There was a really good, I listened to an episode of Risky Business last week that's got, who was on it? Mark Dowd from Azimuth Security, which was that company that allegedly got paid a large sum of money to break in the San Bernardino shooter's phone. And that was a really interesting back and forth with him and the host, I can't remember his name, just talking about like just the 0-day development marketplace and like what that looks like as a tool for like statecraft and intelligence gathering and that type of stuff. It was pretty fascinating.
Well, and it's interesting, like that whole 0-day market, there's a bunch of people that are trying to shut down the United States government buying 0 days, or they're trying to shut down the entire marketplace. And I'd love to get you all's opinion on it, but for me personally, I hate that attitude of it's basically just putting your head in the sand is how I feel about it. Personally, I'm really more of a fan of full disclosure. Get it out there quickly, loudly, and then people fix things. My problem with coordinated disclosure is a lot of coordinated disclosure is basically the vendor trying to put you under a non-disclosure agreement and get you to not talk about something. That's their concern. It's not about fixing their code. So get this stuff out there. Things are only fragile till they break. Fix things. Because my fear, we talk about, possible wide-scale cyber attacks. And it could be the Chinese. It could be the Russians. It could be a terrorist organization. It could be any of these organizations. But my fear is that we will only progress in this community after something catastrophic happens. And, right now with many organizations, there's tons of vulnerabilities in the zero-day marketplaces that are floating around that some of the vendors just don't even have the ability to fix. And the reason why isn't because they're not being told. It's because a lot of those organizations freaking suck to work with doing any type of disclosure. So what do you all think about zero-day marketplaces and stuff?
Well, I read This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends this year, which is centered around the zero-day market and kind of the doom and gloom of it, written by New York Times cybersecurity reporter Nicole Perloff, I believe. And I really enjoyed it, but it was kind of eye-opening at the same time. Just the conflict within the zero-day market. For me, I go to disclosure. Let's get it out there. Put the pressure on the organizations to actually fix their stuff and things like that. I'm kind of wishy-washy on on the government side of especially hoarding 0 days and things go back to Eternal Blue and things like that. There's a level of arrogance that we have with the nobody but us mentality that, oh, we've developed this, nobody else can do that. As we're seeing, going back to the China discussion, is we are quickly being paced, and if not outpaced in some areas. So I think it becomes more and more prudent for us to get these things out there in the public, put the pressure on the organizations to fix their stuff, instead of just hope and pray nobody else sees it.
Can I jump on what Tim is saying there? Not just about fix what's there, but put the things in now, right? I have my repeating code hedgehogs, right? But the thing is, I was at a conference a few weeks ago and they're talking about the new infrastructure that's going in for the systems that don't require carbon, right? So the wind and solar and that sort of thing, and they're not being built securely to begin with, right? So we have this opportunity right now. We're putting in new infrastructure. Let's please do it right.
Well, but I think you're absolutely correct, but that gets into the incentives, right? If you're looking at trying to build a system, any system, you're talking about power generation systems. A number of us have worked on software development or software implementation projects. We pay lip service to security, basically saying, oh, well, we've absolutely got to put security first and foremost. But the reality is everyone's thinking the deadline, right? How are we going to be first to market? How are we going to get this out quickly and efficiently? And that is ultimately what the focus on. And as much as executives would like to say that security matters, at the end of the day, it almost doesn't as well.
And the other thing we have to remember is these systems are being built by the lowest bidder. And so immediately things are going to have to get caught, hit the margins and things like that. And so, I mean, the incentive, unfortunately, is just fundamentally not there for companies to take a truly security first approach.
Well, and if you're pushing that even further in the power industry, there's something called legislative capture. We've talked about it on the show, and you can Google it and you can look at it. But basically what it is, a lot of these different organizations are regulated by public utilities commissions. And there are very specific places and ways that they're allowed to make money. So if they do construction, there's a huge percentage markup that they can have for long haul lines and building power transformers and generators and stations. But whenever it comes to using smart grid technology or clean technology, a number of states disincentivize their power companies to make profits off of putting in the right technologies in place to actually make these grids smarter. So if you aren't making any money on these things, they're completely disincentivized. And you talk about it going to the cheapest person. Of course, that's going to happen as long as there's no way that they can make money doing it from the PUCs as well. So somebody had asked a question. I don't understand how the zero-day market is legal. I don't fully understand how companies can't sue other companies like Zeridium asking for 0 days. Well, a couple of reasons why, all right? So one of the things that's actually protecting people in zero-day market is, oh my God, Consumer Protection Act. I'm getting the act wrong. But the Consumer Protection Act allows you to talk about deficiencies in products with other people. So imagine that you have a refrigerator and this refrigerator goes crazy, it sprouts legs, and it basically starts attacking your family pet. That would be something, if that refrigerator did that, you have legal protections to talk about that publicly with other people about the refrigerator that got all kinds of legs and claws and started going after Fluffy. You can talk about that. If a car has massive problems with its acceleration, or Ford had some problems with some diesel injectors a while ago, you want to be able to talk about those things publicly, and you are protected in talking about those things publicly. So if you ever sign up for a software product and it has a non-disclosure agreement, that non-disclosure agreement was retroactively made illegal and not enforceable. So any non-disclosure agreement that exists in software, it basically makes it so legally that doesn't stand up in court. So you can talk about problems in products. And when you're talking about remotely exploitable vulnerabilities, that is in fact a problem for that product. So it'd be very similar to Consumer Reports. You subscribe to Consumer Reports, you can get information on cars and puppy killing fridges and all these things. And that's something you're paying into for that marketplace for goods and services. You also have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and there's a number of different laws in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that have different provisions in place for things like interoperability. So if you're looking at the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, there's a provision that says you can reverse engineer software for the purposes of making it interoperable with other software. So if you write a program and I want to write a program that makes amazing unicorns go across the bottom of the screen and fart Skittles, I can totally reverse engineer your software to have my magical unicorn do its magic, right? Now, whenever you're writing exploits in 0 days, you're actually reverse engineering for the purposes of making that software interoperable with something like the Metasploit framework. So this is in fact it is legal. It should be legal, because if you go down the slippery slope of suing people that find defects in your product, then any auto manufacturer, blender manufacturer, fan manufacturer, any manufacturer can literally start suing their customers for finding and releasing vulnerabilities or weaknesses or defects in their products themselves. So there you go. So that's why that happens and why it is in fact legal as well. So any other comments or questions on this from the audience or anybody else? I'm a little bit tweaked today from teaching, so I apologize if I'm dropping into instructor more than normal. Anyway. It's like, now John's going on another monologue. So here's a story I didn't read. You guys want to talk about the stolen house one?
Yeah. That's crazy. And we were talking about before we went live about how it's actually so plausible that this could happen, not just in this one case, but the circumstances of this guy who was not at home, been working away for a while, comes back to his house, or he gets his neighbors call and say, hey, all the lights are on in your house and stuff like that. He drives down the next morning and he goes to the front door and his key doesn't work. And he knocks on the door and somebody comes in or opens the door, and he kind of forces his way in, and none of his stuff is there. The carpets have been ripped up. Like, they're basically gutted the house to do a renovation on a house he thinks he still owns. Because
wait a minute. How was the house sold? I don't understand. Could you explain how the attack went down?
Yeah, so basically someone impersonated, I think in the article, Mr. Hall, the owner of the house, and he sold the house.
How did he get to the title company and the deed for the property? Because I know that they still have that in the UK. You can go down.
That's what I wondered.
It's under investigation. Is basically so. It's not very clear as to what actually happened as far as how this process went down and how it wasn't caught. But essentially, for whatever reason, this fraudster was able to successfully sell the house out from under the legitimate owner without him knowing, without him being informed. And someone bought it, and somebody moved all his stuff out and started renovating the house before he was made aware of it. He called the cops.
Where they said, "This is our house now. You're trespassing. Get out."
Yeah, I mean, because legally, the sale went through, and so we were talking about, it's like, it's crazy to have so many people in the right, but it be completely wrong, because the owner of the house, it's under all inclinations, like, that's his house. He paid for it and stuff like that. He's not aware of the situation. The guy working in the house isn't aware of the situation. The people who bought the house isn't aware that they've, ultimately the result of fraud. And it's just chaos. And like, I love the fact of, like, the police were like, yeah, it's his house, or it's, the new owner's house. You got to leave. Because, like, the legal system said this transaction went through.
But if you accept stolen property in any other circumstance, then you wouldn't be allowed to keep it. So I don't understand why the law is on the buyer side. Like, I mean, I wouldn't want to be the seller or the buyer, but like, normally
this sucks for everybody, right? Let's be honest. But yeah. I mean, eventually it's going to go down to the guy who originally owned the house, right? Like it has to.
You think.
I mean, if you look at, like, one of the core tenets of any government, even libertarians, as crazy as they can get about no government, they always come back to, it's like, well, the government should be there to enforce property rights at a minimum, right? It's just, if this is no longer something that's being enforced, God, there's got to be more to the story. This is just absolutely crazy.
It is, and there's a couple of parts that I just love about it in the article is the fact that it's like, oh, this is not, like, they're just like, this is a civil matter, and, like, they're not even, like, bringing in this criminal element to it when at some point in time it's criminal. Like,
somebody's in my house.
I think it's the identity theft situation, right? Because identity theft is really hard to prove. If your identity was stolen, and I had a friend who this happened to, he got arrested because somebody had stolen his identity and, like, was writing bad checks. And even though the officer who knew what the criminal looked absolutely nothing like this friend of mine, he still had to, like, he was still arrested. He still had to, like, it was all on him to prove that he was who he was and that he didn't do what the criminals did. And so could be what's going on here is this guy who had his identity stolen is having to prove that he didn't sell the house instead of the other way around.
So do you think that's what it is? I mean, we're reading into this, right? Like, we're staring at very limited tea leaves.
Yeah.
You would almost have to say that somebody stole his identity, pretended to be him, got, like, the title and the deed and everything transferred over legitimately from the town. Like, that's
right.
Almost what you would
identity
have
theft. Yeah.
So
no, there's definitely a lot more to this story than what we have in this particular article and stuff. But just the situation of itself is just insane. And like, I want to, like, let's say he gets his house back, and he should when this all comes out and stuff. But what about all of his stuff?
It's gone. Like, he's
his
got
carpets, like maybe even some of his walls, and, like, everything is just gone. Like,
well. And in the United States, we've had similar things. We can talk about squatters. That's a different conversation. But what's interesting is there was a series of cases dealing with title attacks. So people were legitimately buying a house, right? So this one couple that was in New Jersey, this was a couple of years ago, maybe 8 now. And they received an email from the title company, business email compromise. Somebody's email was compromised at the title company. And they were told, hey, whenever you transfer the funds to escrow, you want to transfer it to this particular account. Sorry, we had to update it. It's a completely different escrow account. The couple got the email. They said, this is shady and weird. They forwarded it on to their attorney. And they said, this is strange. Is this something we should do? Is this normal? The attorney said, yep, it totally looks legit. You should do that. They then re-forwarded it back to the title company, saying, look, we've just got this email from you all saying we should send it to a different bank account. Is this legit? Should we do this? The title company said, yep, You totally should do that. So then they moved the money to the bank account from the escrow account because it's just a numbered bank account. And it was totally a hack. And the attackers took something, I want to say it was around $250,000 to $300,000. And then it just poof disappears, right? And what was interesting is the couple that was buying the house in Jersey went back to their lawyer and they're like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. And the lawyer was like, oops, totally not my fault. They went back to the title company and they said, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, you've got an email from you saying to do this. And they said, sorry, but your money's gone and you still need to come up with that money. So totally got screwed out of that money. And both of the groups that they sent an email to asking to verify if this transaction was legitimate said, totally not our fault. And it ended up having to go to a judge, of course, because, lawsuits were totally involved in this. And the judge basically ruled that all three parties were guilty equally. So while this couple was able to get 2/3 of their money back from the lawyer, from the title company, they were still out 1/3 of the value of a house. So I guess this is caveat emptor, if I'm mispronouncing that. Definitely buyer beware, be really, really careful. But then this particular scenario, this is totally, completely, and utterly not the same thing. This guy didn't buy anything. He didn't fall for a trap. He didn't do anything that he shouldn't have done. It literally looks like they just dropped straight in and just took it from underneath them. And if you don't think it can happen to you, if you're listening to the show, just give me your name and the city you live in. And within 5 minutes and for $5, I can tell you every place you've lived at. I can find your wife's name. I can find your mother's maiden name. I can get your social security number. I can get loan bank account balances, all of it for $5 with standard background check investigation tools. So this isn't something that's like, well, you just got to be more careful. Nope. They totally can make this happen very quickly and very easily.
Definitely, if you're not going to be at home for an extended period of time, you really have to have somebody living there.
Even his neighbors were like, dude, your lights are on, man. I don't know what's going on over there.
I guess I should now set up an alert to make sure my house doesn't go on the market.
Yeah, you got like the what are the cams, like Nest cams and things like that, where it's like your house.
Write a hook into Zillow or something like that, so that if my address ever pops up as available, maybe I can get a good deal on it.
Oh, that's absolutely crazy. Well, let's talk about some of the friends of Black Hills Information Security. I first want to talk about Dave Kennedy. The article is like ex-NSA hacker. So talking about supply chain is one of the things that keeps him up at night. And anytime I see Dave Kennedy on like MSNBC or anything, or even if he's on like our webcast or whatever, he's not wearing pants in that picture. Right? I mean, we all are aware. If Ryan can bring up the picture of, I can share the screen, can go up. It's at the top. I know for a fact 2 things. One, I know for a fact Dave's not wearing pants in that picture. 2, I know for a fact that he can literally rip that suit top off like the Incredible Hulk and go right back to working out and running and stuff. But all joking aside, really, this gets back into the stuff that's keeping us awake at night. Maybe we need to get Dave on the show one of these days. But, we talk about supply chain attacks. The supply chain is already being pushed to the absolute max right now. Then there's 2 different types of supply chains, right? Like you have the cyber supply chain. You're looking at SolarWinds. You're looking at Microsoft. You're looking at all these companies that are hooked into every other company around the planet. Absolutely is a concern, but also disruption to the real, like physical supply chain, which is already completely maxed out, is something that just scares the living hell out of me as well. So I don't know. It just seems, honestly, guys, I hate to be a downer today, but it seems like there'd be dark clouds on the horizon. Am I wrong? Do we have a silver lining?
No. But they're not
that
just on the
storm's been
horizon.
brewing for a while, right?
Yeah, they're not just on the horizon. They've been here for a while. I think we're starting to shed some light on it. Supply chain is something that, obviously SolarWinds brought spotlights to it and things like that. But this is between the combination of supply chain issues and things like the Russians attacking service providers and stuff like that. Like that's how companies are going to get breached now and in the future. Because if you look at it, most companies have a fairly decent perimeter. They've been able to leverage a lot of technology, secure by default configurations or as close as possible and things like that. As testers and things like that, we have to get really creative on how we want to get in or how we might even be able to possibly get in. But having things like being able to go after supply chains and things that these organizations are relying on to do their day in and day job, it's not necessarily an easy win. For someone like a nation state or things like that. But once it's successful, the reward for that is just astronomical because it's much easier to target one group. And then instead of trying to target, 1,000, 2,000 individual groups. And it's just because we have these ecosystems that are so reliant on some of these softwares and these technologies and things like that, like it is scary. And it's just going to get worse, especially as we start to give up control and start putting more of our faith and reliance on these other softwares for whatever reasons, whether it's budgetary or manpower, things like we don't have the resources to do this. So we're going to go buy these software or we're going to buy this tech stack that's going to do this for us. We're becoming very reliant on that system or those things to be secure, and they're just not.
Well, and the other thing, you talk about, you mentioned pen testing at the beginning and how we've got to be creative and things like that. Okay. So there was a debate internal to Black Hills Information Security's pen testing team about whether or not there's value in calling out a company's DTECs as we're pen testing them. Like if we're doing assumed compromise, C2, lateral movement testing, is there value in us documenting what they detected? Now, the contrary argument is no, there's no value because they know that we're pen testing them, right? So what possible value is there if they know that an attack is coming and they were able to detect the attack? It kind of degrades the efficacy of that detection in actually saying, yep, congratulations, gold star, you detected us. The other side of that is, and this is my opinion, if it's like, well, what the hell are we doing there, right? Like it isn't just about finding vulnerabilities anymore whenever you're doing red teaming or you're doing pen testing, and it shouldn't be. It's not about just getting in and proving that you can hack and bypassing things. Honestly, if you're going to be doing pen testing correctly, whether it's an external third-party consulting firm or you're doing it internally and doing security testing, your number one goddamn goal is to get caught. And I can't stress this enough in this industry. Our goal is to get caught. Our goal is to help organizations get better. Our goal is to make our lives hard, which is a very weird thing for many people to understand. So whenever you're looking at like the Chinese threat, the 0 days, we're talking about Russians and supply chain attacks. You need to look at every single component in your environment as a possible failure point. And you need to make sure that your architectures are resilient enough that if you have a SolarWinds attack, you can still detect, okay, we've got a beacon coming from our Orion server. We might want to look into that. Or now all of a sudden there's lateral movement coming from the Orion server and they're running the equivalent of Bloodhound to enumerate act. You should be able to freaking detect that. So whenever we've been talking about defense in depth, what that means is an assumption that any individual component can and will fail. So Tim, I absolutely agree. And once again, like you said at the onset, that's what we're doing as pen testers. And that's what we should be doing as pen testers, is trying to get caught, trying to help an organization identify multiple detection points as well. So anybody else have anything about that? I mean, it's just kind of a bit of a frustrating thing, I guess.
I mean, I think part of it too is tuning, sure, stuff might have gotten detected, but if like a signal to noise ratio for an organization is so off that like they just got overwhelmed with detections and the ones that didn't matter and really needed to get escalated didn't get escalated, then, that's another kind of opportunity for improvement that we help provide.
And as you know, whenever we're working with companies, it's like, they're like, well, we detected it, but there was 400 other alerts that happened at the exact same time. that's where we can come in, and that's where any good testing organization should come in and try to help. So that supply chain thing that Dave's talking about, and by the way, once again, I don't want this to come across as a commercial for BHIS. Trusted Sec absolutely has the exact same philosophy whenever they go in and they help organizations to basically make their lives more difficult as well. So, can we talk about another, I hate to say this, but another friend of Black Hills Information Security, Rob Emley, or as we call him, Mini Lee. So at SANS, we had Rob Lee, which is the forensics instructor, who's like 7'4". I don't know, the dude's huge. And then Rob Emley is like normal, and but we called him Mini Rob Lee. And so a little bit of background on Dragos that I think is pretty cool. Dragos is one of those companies that got a lot of their early funding from the actual customers in the power grid environments that were going to get their services. And it was literally a bunch of some of the smartest people in the world in the SCADA, ICS, OT area getting together and talking about what actually is needed in this particular market vertical to help secure these organizations with some understanding of the uniqueness that exists in some of the legacy technologies that actually exist. And I think that relationship worked out very well. Some of the other people that were involved are no longer with us. Won't get into that. But what Rob always talked about when he first got started with this stuff, and he believed enough in this to move away from a place that he loved to move up to the DC area to make this thing happen, is Rob always talked about the goal and objective of Dragos is to save civilization. And that may seem like hyperbole, it may seem like a bit much, but it's awesome for me, seeing them come up, talking to the people that work at that company. They absolutely believe that. That's their corporate culture, and they take that crap really seriously. So I'm not at all surprised to see that they got another 200 million raise, and I think that puts them at 1 point something billion market valuation. I can't remember what the total number is.
I mean, that's a great pitch, though. If you asked me for money and you said the goal is to try and save civilization with that money, I would definitely give it to you. Well, I think people have been scared of lamenting a future theoretical digital Pearl Harbor for a long time, and I think that ICS SCADA space is definitely where that threshold from a digital attack into physical repercussions is most likely to happen.
Yeah, well, and if you think about it, one of these places goes down in flames, and you're talking about thousands of lives, right? And we had Rob on our 24-hour pre-show banter con-a-thon, which has totally not been recorded. We're not going to release it publicly because we were talking about running over koalas and cannibalism at various points in the 24-hour pre-show banter con-a-thon. But at any rate, he was on, and one of the things that he saw as a silver lining, and maybe it's a good way to close things out, is he said things are definitely getting better, especially in the United States, because a lot of these different organizations have had wake-up calls sometimes foisted upon them. And some of them have been hit. Some of them have seen some of the sister organizations get hit. So they understand just how important this actually is. So he's feeling pretty good about the United States. I'm less optimistic, but he does say internationally, we're still pretty hosed. So good on Rob, good on the people at Dragos, and really wish them Godspeed in their mission. All right, do we have any other stories you all want to talk about?
I mean, briefly, you could connect that with that Iranian fuel hack.
Talk about it. I don't know about that one. If you want to throw it up there.
I think I saw it pop up on Twitter first. Let me pull up the article. But essentially, a large number of Iranian gas stations were taken out of commission. Initially, I think they reported it as being due to some sort of error outage. But I think as more information came out, they attributed it to some sort of cyber attack. So I think over 3,500 stations across the whole country was effectively taken down. People couldn't get gas. People lined up for gas.
Well, if there's a sign saying cyber attack 64411, that probably was a cyber attack.
Yeah, I like that. A clue, which could be a false lead, is a message displayed on the machine. It's nah, that's probably a cyber attack, right?
Yeah.
Probably. I'm mothballing here. Now, I've got a question. I wanted to ask you guys about brief disclosures. Do you guys remember 10 years ago like what the average like breach identification time frame was, like time to detect an attack? You go back a decade ago and it was like over a year on average for organizations to detect they were compromised. And lately that number has been going down. And I even saw like one RSA keynote presentation where the guy was like walking around, like patting people on the back, like, look, everybody, we've got it down to like a month. And honestly, what's been driving that down has been ransomware, where the attackers get in and then they basically let the company know, hey, you've been hacked, cyber attack 6414411. And then they're like, well, congratulations, they were able to detect that breach in less than a day. Well done. I think we have to be careful where we get our numbers on this stuff.
And was that really in a day, right? They probably had, they've been in there a while doing their recon. It's not like that happened in a day.
Well, it was pretty easy to detect when they're all locked out. It's something. We don't have exact details of the incident, but we do know there was an incident.
I was recently in a meeting for a company that got hit by ransomware, and I was just an advisory consultant. Like BHIS wasn't working this gig, and it was one of the most uncomfortable meetings where the CEO was literally asking the security team, like, "What the hell am I paying you guys for?" And that was painful.
Sounds uncomfy.
And the reason why I asked that question is the cybersecurity team, when they were doing a presentation about the attack, said that we detected the attack in less than 24 hours. And the CEO picked up on that and was like, oh, no, you didn't detect it in less than 24 hours. The attacker put something up on the screen for you to send Bitcoin to. That doesn't mean that you detected it. And it was a really hard conversation to sit in on. So get ready, everybody. We're all going to be having those conversations at some point. Well, are we ready to take it out, everybody?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just want to say thanks for coming on. I'm sorry I'm completely fried. Like, been setting up and teaching. I think we got 500-600 people in this class, so I'm a little bit caffeinated right now.
You gotta be.
But once again, everyone, thank you so much for listening to Black Hills Information Security talking about news, and we'll see you all next week.